And the night Harper Winters had nowhere left to run, she did something unthinkable. She walked up to a Hells Angels biker and whispered 8 desperate words, and everyone had warned her. Stay away from bikers. They're dangerous. They're criminals. But when bad men hunted her through Phoenix streets and the world turned its back on a homeless 9-year-old, Harper made a choice that changed everything, and she chose to trust the men everyone feared. What happened next destroyed every wrong idea Phoenix had about the Hells Angels. 400 bikers mobilized across Arizona, and proving that sometimes the people society rejects are the only ones who remember what it means to protect the helpless. And this is what really happened when judgment met reality. If you're fascinated by stories that challenge our deepest prejudices and reveal unexpected compassion, and hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment sharing what surprised you most about this story. Your support keeps these powerful stories coming, and thanks for being here. Let's begin. And the Arizona sun had already set when 9-year-old Harper Winters pressed her small body against the brick wall of a closed pawn shop on Van Buren Street. And the evening air brought little comfort to the girl, whose stomach had been empty since yesterday morning. She clutched a torn backpack containing everything she owned, and a faded photo of her mother. A stuffed rabbit with one missing eye. A thin blanket that smelled of dust and fear. Harper had been living on Phoenix streets for 3 weeks, and ever since her mother was taken away in an ambulance and never came back, she'd learned which corners to avoid, which alleys offered shelter, and in which faces belonged to people who saw homeless children as either invisible or easy targets. But tonight was different. Tonight, and Harper was losing the battle against her own fear. A group of men had followed her earlier, their intentions clear in their predatory smiles, and she'd managed to lose them in downtown Phoenix, but her luck wouldn't hold forever. The rumble of motorcycle engines cut through the evening air like thunder, and Harper watched as motorcycles turned onto Van Buren Street, their chrome gleaming under street lights. The riders wore leather vests with patches, and their faces were hidden behind dark sunglasses. Most people crossed the street at the sight of them. The Hells Angels had a reputation, and parents pulled their children closer when the motorcycles roared past. Shopkeepers watched nervously. But Harper wasn't most people, and she was a desperate child who'd run out of options and time. She'd heard the whispers about the Hells Angels. Stories of violence and lawlessness, but she'd also learned something important in her short, difficult life, and the people society told you to fear were sometimes the only ones who would help when everyone else looked away. Harper took a deep breath and stepped out of the shadows, and her legs shook as she crossed Van Buren Street. The distance couldn't have been more than 50 yards, but it felt like miles, and the bikers noticed her when she was about 10 feet away. And the conversation died as 23 pairs of eyes focused on the small girl approaching with a torn backpack and clothes that had been dirty for weeks, and Grant Blackwell stepped forward. He was the vice president of the Hells Angels Phoenix chapter. At 42, he'd seen more than most people experienced in a lifetime, and he positioned himself between Harper and the rest of his crew. Then his defensive posture softened into concern. The girl looked like she'd been living rough for weeks, and her brown hair hung in tangled strands around a too thin face. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but it was her eyes that struck Grant the hardest, and they held desperate determination. Harper stopped a few feet away. Her voice, when she finally found it, was barely above a whisper. "I have nowhere to sleep tonight." And the parking lot fell completely silent. "How old are you?" Grant asked, his voice gentler than people expected from a man his size. 9. "I turned 10 in November. And where are your parents?" "My mom died 3 weeks ago. I don't have a dad." Harper's voice cracked. "They tried to put me in foster care, but I ran. And I heard stories about what happens to kids in the system." Grant's jaw tightened. He'd heard those stories too. "You've been on the streets this whole time?" And another biker asked. Harper nodded. "I've been staying in different places, behind dumpsters, in parking garages, under bridges." Her voice dropped even lower. "But tonight, and some men have been following me. I can't outrun them anymore. I'm too tired." The protective anger that rose in Grant was immediate and fierce, and he glanced back at his brothers and saw the same response in their faces. These were men society called criminals and outlaws. But they were also fathers, uncles, brothers, and men who understood that some lines you never cross, some innocence you always protect. "What's your name?" Grant asked. "Harper." Harper Winters. Harper, I'm Grant, and this here is my family. He gestured to the men behind him. We're going to help you, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Harper studied Grant's face and, searching for any sign of danger. She'd gotten good at reading people over the past 3 weeks. But Grant's eyes held something different, and a fierceness that wasn't directed at her, but at the world that had put a 9-year-old on the streets alone and terrified. Okay, she whispered. Grant turned to his crew, and Victor, call the clubhouse. Tell them we're bringing a kid who needs help. Kenny, get some food from that store on the corner. Nothing too heavy. Joey, scope the area and see if anyone's watching or following her. The bikers moved immediately. This was how the Hells Angels operated. When someone needed help, and the entire Brotherhood responded. Come on, Grant said to Harper. Let's get you somewhere safe. Grant pulled out his phone and called the chapter president. Prez, and it's Grant. We've got a situation. 9-year-old homeless girl just approached me on Van Buren. She says men have been following her and she's got nowhere to go, and I'm bringing her to the clubhouse. He ended the call and looked down at Harper. Ever been on a bike before? Harper shook her head, and it's going to be loud and you need to hold on tight. Can you do that? Yes. Grant adjusted a helmet over Harper's tangled hair. This will keep you safe. When I get on, and you climb up behind me and wrap your arms around my waist. Don't let go no matter what, understand? Harper nodded. They pulled out in formation, and 23 motorcycles roaring through Phoenix's streets. People stopped and stared as they passed, most with fear. But Harper, and pressed against Grant's back as they roared through the desert night, felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 weeks. Safety. And the clubhouse sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, a low concrete building surrounded by chain link fence and security cameras, and as Grant led the formation through the gates, Harper saw several men stationed near the entrance, their eyes scanning carefully, and 3 more bikers emerged from the building, led by Richard Prez Coleman, the chapter president. He was 58, with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, and when his gaze landed on Harper, his expression softened. This the girl, he asked Grant. Harper Winters, 9 years old. Mother died 3 weeks ago. Been on the street since, and says men have been following her. Prez crouched to Harper's eye level. Harper, my name's Richard, but everyone here calls me Prez. Grant tells me you need help, and Harper nodded. I didn't know where else to go. You came to the right place, the clubhouse? Harper was amazed by how many men were already there. Within 20 minutes, and close to 80 bikers filled the space, all focused on the small girl sitting at the bar with a convenience store sandwich in front of her, and Prez raised his hand and the room fell silent. Brothers, listen up. This young lady is Harper Winters. She's 9 years old, recently lost her mother, and has been living on Phoenix streets for 3 weeks. She came to Grant tonight asking for help because men have been following her, and a rumble of anger ran through the gathered bikers. Now we all know what happens to kids who slip through the cracks in this city, Prez continued, and we know because some of us were those kids. Harper came to us because she had no one else, and she came to us even though the whole world tells little girls to run from men like us. So what are we going to do about it? And we're going to do what we always do when someone asks our family for protection, a biker called out from the back. We're going to give it to her, and the room erupted in agreement. Here's how this works, Prez continued. First, we find those men who've been following Harper, Joey, and get descriptions and start canvassing Van Buren. Second, we figure out Harper's living situation. Grant, you're her primary contact. Third, we reach out to other chapters, and every Hells Angels member in Arizona needs to know about Harper. This girl is under our protection now. Prez looked directly at Harper. Harper, and when we say you're under our protection, we mean it. That means 400 Hebrews members across Arizona are now looking out for you. If anyone tries to hurt you, and they answer to all of us, you're not alone anymore. Do you understand? Harper nodded, tears streaming down her face for the first time since her mother died, and the relief was overwhelming. A woman emerged from a back room. She was in her 40s, wearing jeans and a Hells Angels support shirt with kind eyes. This is Ruby, and Grant told Harper. She's Prez's wife. She's gonna help get you cleaned up and find you proper clothes. Ruby smiled warmly. Come on, sweetheart, and let's get you into the shower. Harper emerged 45 minutes later transformed. Ruby had found clothes that fit. Her hair had been washed and pulled back in a ponytail, and Some of the haunted look had faded from her expression. Joey waited with a notebook. "Harper, I need to ask you some questions about the men who've been following you, and the more details you give us, the better chance we have of finding them." Harper described 3 men she'd noticed tracking her movements over the past week, and Joey took careful notes about heights, builds, clothing, vehicles, and locations. "The one with the blue jacket, did he have any special features?" Joey asked. "And he had a tattoo on his neck, like a spiderweb, and he drove a white pickup with a dent in the passenger door." "That's really helpful, Harper." Joey made notes. "And we're gonna find these guys. And when we do, they're going to learn that some people in this city are off limits." Within an hour, and every Hells Angels member in Phoenix had descriptions of the 3 men. But it didn't stop there. Prez reached out to chapter presidents across Arizona, Tucson, Flagstaff, and Mesa Prescott. Within 2 hours, over 200 bikers across the state had mobilized to protect Harper. Ruby returned with real food: pasta with marinara sauce, garlic bread, and vegetables. Harper ate hungrily. "Why are you doing this?" Harper asked Ruby. "You don't even know me." Ruby smiled sadly. "Because we know what it's like to be judged, and Harper, we know what it means when society decides you're not worth protecting. And we know that the people who need help the most are often the ones everyone else ignores. But I'm nobody. I'm just a homeless kid." "You're not nobody. You're Harper Winters, and you had the courage to ask for help when you needed it most." And Ruby placed a gentle hand on Harper's shoulder. "Besides, you're family now, and family protects family always." Throughout the night, more bikers arrived. By midnight, and over 150 Hells Angels were actively involved in protecting one 9-year-old girl. At 20 in the morning, Joey's phone buzzed. He strode quickly to Prez and Grant. "And we found them." 3 guys matching Harper's descriptions, cruising Van Buren in a white pickup with damage to the passenger door. 30 brothers have eyes on them right now, and Press's expression went cold. "Where?" "Near the bus station on Jefferson. They're parked watching the homeless population. Looks like they're hunting. Call Phoenix PD and get them down there with the description. Make it clear these men have been targeting a child." Prez paused. "And Joey, and make sure our brothers don't do anything that'll blow back on the chapter. We watch, we document, we provide information to law enforcement, and we do not engage unless those men try to hurt someone." Clear, crystal clear. Harper had fallen asleep on the couch. Ruby covered her with a blanket and dimmed the lights. And around 40 in the morning, Phoenix police pulled over the white pickup on a traffic stop. The driver had outstanding warrants for drug possession, and when cops searched the vehicle, they found materials suggesting the men were involved in human trafficking. All 3 were arrested, and morning arrived with Arizona sunshine streaming through the clubhouse windows. Harper woke confused for a moment, then remembered. She was safe. She was warm, and she wasn't alone. Ruby appeared with breakfast. "The child services supervisor will arrive within the hour to talk about options for your care." "Will they make me leave?" and Harper asked, fear creeping back. "Not if we can help it," Ruby answered honestly. "But Harper, the important thing is making sure you're safe and taken care of, and we'll still be here. You're part of our family now, and that doesn't change neither where you sleep at night." Grant joined them. Joey's crew tracked those men all night, and around 40 this morning, Phoenix PD pulled them over. Turns out the driver had outstanding warrants. When cops searched the vehicle, and they found materials suggesting the men were involved in human trafficking. They're all in custody now. Harper's eyes widened. They were going to try, and Grant said firmly. "But they didn't get the chance. You came to us, we protected you, and now they're going to face justice." At 9:30, and a silver sedan pulled through the clubhouse gates. A woman in her 50s emerged. This was Linda Reeves, the child services supervisor Prez had contacted, and Linda spoke with Prez, then entered the main room. Her eyes landed on Harper, who sat between Ruby and Grant. "Harper, my name is Linda Reeves, and I work for Child Protective Services. I understand you've been through a very difficult time." What followed was a careful interview that lasted nearly an hour, and Linda asked about Harper's mother, about the 3 weeks on the streets, about how she'd ended up at the Hells Angels clubhouse. Finally, Linda closed her notebook. "And here's what I'm seeing. Harper is clearly traumatized, but appears to be in good health now. She's formed a bond with this community and feels safe here, and the men threatening her are now in police custody." "What does that mean for replacement?" Prez asked. Legally, and I need to place Harper in emergency foster care while we search for relatives, Linda said. However, I have some discretion. And Phoenix has a shortage of quality emergency foster homes. Placing Harper with strangers right now could be more harmful than helpful. She paused, and, I've worked with the Hells Angels before on community initiatives. I know that despite your reputation, your organization does genuine good in this city, and I can see that Harper trusts you. What are you proposing? Ruby asked. Ruby, I understand you and Richard have experience as foster parents from 15 years ago, and… That's right, Ruby confirmed. If you're willing to become emergency foster parents again, I can place Harper with you temporarily, and she'd stay here under your direct supervision. We do regular check-ins and Harper would need to return to school immediately, and it would give us time to find the best long-term solution without traumatizing her with multiple placements. Harper's grip on Grant's hand tightened painfully, and hope and fear fighting in her expression. We'll do it, Ruby said immediately. Whatever paperwork you need, whatever requirements we have to meet, we'll do it. And there will be conditions, Linda warned. Home visits, background checks, mandatory counseling for Harper, educational requirements. And understand that this is temporary. And if we locate relatives willing to take Harper, we'll need to transition her. We understand, Prez said. We're not trying to get around the system, and we're trying to make sure Harper doesn't fall through the cracks. Linda smiled slightly. That's exactly the right answer. She turned to Harper. And what do you think about this? Would you be comfortable staying with Ruby and Richard for a while? Harper looked at Ruby, then at Grant, then at Prez. These people, and these outlaws these men and women society feared. They were offering her safety, stability, and time to heal. Yes, Harper whispered, please. Then let's make it happen. And as Linda and Ruby worked through paperwork, Grant stepped outside with Prez. She's going to be okay, Prez said. We'll make sure of it. The whole chapter mobilized for her, and Grant said. Over 200 brothers from across Arizona, all because one kid asked for help. That's who we are when people give us the chance to show it, Prez said, and the world sees monsters. They see the patches and the bikes and the reputation, and they decide we're beyond saving. But that girl in there, she saw past all that, and she saw men who might help when everyone else had turned away. And we did help. Damn right we did. Because that's what brotherhood means, and it's about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. It's about proving that compassion and loyalty aren't exclusive to respectable society. By noon, and the clubhouse was packed again. Bikers brought clothes, school supplies, and more food than any child could eat. Harper sat at the center of it all, and overwhelmed by the generosity. Grant watched as chapter members knelt down to Harper's level and promised that she'd always have family in the Hells Angels, and he thought about prejudice, about the assumptions society made regarding who deserved trust and who deserved fear, and the Hells Angels would never be respectable in conventional terms. They'd never checked their outlaw reputation. But they'd saved Harper Winters, and they'd mobilized hundreds of men to protect a child who had no one else. Linda left around 1:00 in the afternoon, satisfied that Harper was in good hands, and Ruby had already scheduled Harper's school enrollment for Monday morning. Later, Harper found herself standing beside Grant near the clubhouse entrance. Thank you, and she said quietly, for listening when I asked for help. Grant looked down at the 9-year-old girl who'd changed so much in just one night. You were brave, Harper, and braver than most adults I know. You asked for help when you needed it, and you trusted people everyone told you to fear. Why do people hate you so much? Harper asked. And everyone acts like the Hells Angels are the worst people in the world, but you saved me. That's not evil. Grant was quiet for a moment, and people are afraid of what they don't understand, Harper. They see the patches and the bikes and the reputation, and they make assumptions, and the Hells Angels have done things that earned our reputation. But people forget that we're human beings too, with families and feelings and the ability to choose kindness. And so they judge you without knowing you. Exactly. Just like people were going to judge you for being homeless and decide you weren't worth helping. Prejudice works both ways, but you proved them wrong by helping me. Maybe we just gave you one example that things aren't always what they seem. Grant smiled slightly. The truth is, Harper, and the world is complicated. The Hells Angels aren't angels, despite the name. We've made mistakes, broken laws, done things we're not proud of, but we're not monsters either. We're men who choose to live by our own code, who value loyalty and brotherhood, and who remember what it's like to be judged before anyone bothered to know our story. I'm glad I asked you for help, Harper said, and I'm glad I didn't listen to everyone who said to stay away from bikers. I'm glad you asked too, because it gave us the chance to show you who we really are. And Grant placed a hand on Harper's shoulder. And it gave you a family, Harper. A weird, unconventional, intimidating family. But a family that will protect you no matter what. And inside, someone had started playing music. Ruby waved at Harper to come join them, and the girl ran off with the kind of energy children should have. Happy, safe, and unburdened by fear. Grant stayed outside a moment longer, thinking about the power of a single moment, 24 hours ago, and Harper Winters had been a homeless child facing predators with no protection and no hope. And she'd approached the most feared motorcycle club in America and whispered 8 desperate words. And those words had mobilized 400 Hells Angels across Arizona, and in a parking lot on Van Buren Street, prejudice had met reality. And reality looked like 400 bikers in death's head patches, and proving that brotherhood means protecting the vulnerable. That loyalty means standing up for those who can't defend themselves, and that sometimes the people everyone tells you to fear are the only ones who remember what it means to be human. Harper Winters had nowhere to sleep that night, but she'd asked for help from the right people. And the Hells Angels had responded with everything they had and shattering every prejudice Phoenix held about men in leather vests. The real story wasn't about bikers rescuing a homeless girl, and it was about a child brave enough to see past society's prejudices, and an organization loyal enough to prove that those prejudices were wrong. And that was a story worth telling, worth living, and worth fighting for, no matter what anyone else thought.